So peeps, Rockwell here. We are back with another boss fight creature tier list, but this time it's on Aberration. Now Aberration's boss fight is very different to most others, as you can't really do the rush strategy alone to win here. Instead, you're being forced to go around the whole arena destroying tentacles before you can even damage the main boss. The typical boss fight options like Rexes, Udis, and Daedons aren't allowed on this map either. This means you'll have to come up with unique strategies with unique creatures to fight this boss. And this tier list should hopefully give you a good idea on what to use. Note that this tier list is only the creatures that spawn on Aberration and can be brought to the boss fight, and is not considering transfers. Finally, note that this is all just my opinion coming from a goofy PvE player perspective, so feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments. F tier goes to creatures I couldn't really find many reasons to use in this fight at all. On the bottom half we have the Achatina, Dodo, Otter, Dung Beetle, Diplocalus, Dimetrodon, Oviraptor, Parasaur, Ovis, Moschops, and Lystrosaurus. They all have some cool abilities, but unfortunately these abilities aren't really useful for this fight. Like for example, the Otter can give you some insane insulation, but temperature is never a problem in this arena, and honestly on Aberration in general. The only good thing about a lot of these is that the herbivores can use Vegicakes to make them somewhat tanky, and things like the Otter can wear a helmet for armor. Not much else though. On the top half of this tier list we got the Aranio, Titanoboa, Bulmascorpius, Arthropleura, Doedicurus, Anki, and Purlovia. These guys are somewhat decent fighters, being a bit more built for it, but still not too great in the stat department. A few special abilities of note here, like the Arthros have recoil, but it's not useful at all for this fight since it doesn't seem to apply to Rockwell's attacks. This can be somewhat nice when the Reaper is a nameless spawn though. Doedicurus and Ankis do some pretty solid damage actually with the ability to put on saddles, and Ankis can use Vegicakes. Unfortunately, neither have the best stat in the world with no mobility, so they aren't too useful in my opinion. Purlovias do actually have some okay stats, but unfortunately you can't ride them or give them a saddle, which knocks them down a ton. Their burrow ability doesn't really have much use in this fight either. D tier includes creatures that have maybe a decent aspect or two that might make them useful for this fight, but still aren't great in my opinion. Triceratops can be nice to use, as the big arena does actually give them some room to use their charge ability against the Reapers and such. The front facing weapon can be useful to block things like the Reaper's attacks, they can use Vegicakes, and can have saddles too of course. However, their health stat is just really bad, and on top of that, the damage they block in the front isn't super useful against the constant barrage of element balls this fight throws at you from all angles. Gigantopithecus is a fun one, as you do actually have the ability to ride them. They can possibly chuck you up during this fight to give you the ability to glide and shoot the tentacles. They also can wear helmets and eat Vegicakes to make themselves pretty dang tanky. Still not the best stats in the world though on their own, and probably just aren't tanky enough for this fight. Next we got the Sarco. Now the last time I made one of these tier lists, I got a lot of crap for putting the Sarco so low on my tier list. So let me explain. Sarcos can do okay damage, but that health stat is honestly so terrible. Their attack range is also very awkward, with you almost feeling forced to constantly use that turn ability they have on land to even hit things. If this boss fight was like an underwater one, maybe I would give them a C tier at least, but I just can't go higher than D tier here. Since the Deinosuchus doesn't spawn an Aberration to completely outclass them though, I will at least give them the mid D tier spot for this ranking. Raptor I have just above the Sarco for reasons I stated before, but the damage output Raptors can put out in general as a group is insane. Their pack ability can honestly make them do some of the highest DPS in the game. The downside to them is that they unfortunately aren't that tanky even with the pack ability, so it makes them not great for this Rockwell fight. They do actually have decent mobility to get around though if you want to use them for destroying the tentacles. Carbon Enemies is the big ol' tank of ARK, and tanks in general are honestly a solid option for this boss fight. Compared to others in ARK, it's super long, so having a creature that can take a good amount of damage is really nice to have. Other than being tanky slightly though, turtles don't have much else. They don't do good damage, one of the few herbivores that can't use Vegicakes, and they definitely aren't good in the mobility department. They can use saddles though, if you really want to ride them, or to make them a bit more tanky. Carnos will always be the outdated oddball of the carnivore faction in ARK for me. They have okay mobility and can do decent damage. However, their bleed ability isn't useful at all for this fight, as it doesn't work on Rockwell or the Reapers. The health stat on Carnos also isn't the greatest, which is a really bad thing to have in this fight in particular. C tier is for creatures that are decent and maybe you can consider them for some wacky strategies. Megalania are an interesting creature for this fight, as they are the only ones besides the Rock Drake that can climb the walls. This can be useful to get to a perch to shoot the boss, and their stats are okay-ish. I say this as I just figured out they have a higher base health stat than a Carno by the way, which is just insane to me. Iguanodon, Equus, Beelzebufo, Rollrat, and Cosmo are all here for a similar reason. That being them being pretty good options to get around the arena to dodge the element balls, which is huge for a fight like this. They each have specific uses too, like Equus and Iguanodon can use Vegicakes, the burst of speed from Beelzebufo jump and the Rollrat roll are perfect for dodging tentacle attacks, and Cosmo has a charge light web attack that can be really helpful against the Reapers. The Eiling are an interesting case, as they are pretty much a worse version of a Rock Drake when it comes to this fight. Their mobility can be nice to dodge the element balls if you're good enough at it, and shoot the tentacles. The feather attack they do can also be nice to do big damage to Reapers if you can get it off. However, their their health stat is just awful, which as I stated multiple times before, is a really bad thing in this fight to have. Ravengers are what I consider simply a better version of a raptor, which can be nice for this fight. They are really tanky with good damage, especially with the pack ability, and the jump they do is nice for dodging tentacle attacks during the fight. There are just much better options for this kind of playstyle though we'll get to later. Near the top of this tier we have the Fasulasukis, a new addition to ARK from Scorched Earth that does actually have some really solid base stats. The burrow ability can also be a decent escape tool in sketchy situations during the fight if you're riding one. Unfortunately, you can't dodge the element balls while underground, which I'd say is a huge downside. And I'd still say there are tankier options further down the list that are better overall. The Sandstorm ability can be useful against Reapers if you can somehow pull it off though. Dire Bear is an interesting option, and I admit I might be ranking it too high here, but whatever. They don't got the best health stat, but man, can these things pump out damage. The base stat is equivalent to a Rex, but they can bite super quickly. On top of that, they got the option to use a claw swipe too for some extra damage with the downside of keeping you in place. It's also one of the only creatures you can use here that picks up speed if given enough room, and this arena definitely has room. Again, I might be overrating them here since that health stat is so bad, but I at least think a Dire Bear's damage is underrated. B tier goes to creatures that I think are just solid overall, and maybe you should consider them. At the bottom we have the Baryonyx. Baryonyx is what I consider one of the best jack-of-all-trades creatures for this fight. They have very solid stats across the board, decent mobility with a jump, and the ability to shoot on the back of them with a saddle. Overall, again, a decent option if you want to ride this, but probably better options we'll talk about later on. Gigantoraptor is an interesting one, as the buff it applies to imprinted babies makes it a support creature of sorts if you're willing to put in the effort. This would be the only support creature really available since the others are pretty much banned or non-existent on this map. On top of this support ability, it has really good mobility with a glide that can definitely be useful for getting around during this fight, and a decent health stat. Another solid option all around. Karkinos is another interesting one, as you would think initially it's more of a utility-based creature instead of fighting. I would argue these people are wrong, however, as Karkinos are actually tanky as crap, with a base health stat that is actually higher than a Rex. This on top of their solid damage with the double claw attack can actually be pretty deadly in this fight. They are breedable in ASA 2 now, which is a huge plus. Karkinos does also have a mobility option if you plan on riding them during this fight with their big jump, which can definitely be useful for getting away. I wouldn't say they have a ton in terms of horizontal mobility though compared to other creatures, but it's definitely there. Another niche but definitely useful thing is their ability to pick up and throw other survivors or smaller creatures. A very fun and solid option overall that I'd say deserves the top of this tier. A tier goes to what I consider strong options for this fight you should probably consider using. At the bottom we have all the light pets. Light pets make it so you do more damage to the Nameless and Reapers that spawn in this fight, and that is extremely helpful. The only reason light pets aren't S tier is because I wouldn't say a light pet is required, as it is possible to just ignore all the Reapers and Nameless that spawn in this fight to focus on Rockwell, but it is extremely difficult. Now for which one is best for this fight, I'd argue it goes to the Bulb Dog, as they have the highest charge capacity. If you level this dude enough, you can just keep the charge light on the whole time, and never have to worry about it. Shinern is solid too, being a jack-of-all-trades option with its stats. On the top half of A tier, we got a bunch of creatures I consider a solid option for an army if you're willing to put in the work for them. Spino, Basilisk, Stegosaurus, and Megalosaurus. I'll go over each of these creatures' strengths to get into why I think they are so good. Spino is probably the worst of the bunch here, having the lowest health stat, but this was buffed recently, so they definitely move up in the tier list. The fact that the Rex isn't an option on this map definitely boosts them up a ton too in my opinion. This fight can favor mobility over brute strength, which the Spino definitely has with its quadruped mode. If bred enough, these can be a good option to maybe spread out pressure throughout the arena. Basilisk is a really interesting one with some fun abilities. They have a spitting projectile attack to hit things from range, they're now breedable in ASA which is huge, and they have the highest health stat of the bunch here by far. As I stated before, having health is super nice for this fight. Unfortunately, the downsides start with its burrow ability. As like the Fasulasukis, it isn't super useful for this fight since the element balls will hit you underground to force you out anyway. They also don't have much mobility in general, so you are going to be using these guys as a brute strength option to fight Rockwell himself if you want to use an army of them. Stegosaurus might have the lowest health stat here, still might honestly be even tankier than the previously mentioned Basilisk. They can go into a hardened mode which reduces damage by 50%. They can wear saddles, and they can use veggie cakes since they are herbivores. All this damage reduction on top of each other is still insane to this day, and it makes them a solid option for this fight if you put in the work. They do surprisingly good damage too with their tail attack. At the top of A tier we got the Megalosaurus. If you want the Rex from the island back, well here he is, but now he's on cocaine. They have a bit lower health than the Rex, but the damage output of a Megalosaurus is freaking nuts compared to most creatures. They do even more than a Rex, and on top of that attack even faster. Their bugs they had in the past for years have been pretty much patched out, and they they don't sleep at all in Aberration, so a crazy option all around I'd highly recommend. The only real reason I don't have them in S tier, as just like the Stego, they don't really have much at all in terms of mobility. In S tier, we got two creatures I say are almost required for you to win this fight, as it would be very difficult without them. First is the Reaper King. Easily the best stats of any creature on Aberration, a constant free 80% damage reduction with their armor, and on top of those insane stats, they still have a really solid mobility with a crazy jump. The only real downside to them is that if you consider riding a Reaper during the fight, a life pet removes the armor reduction. But honestly, even without the 80% damage reduction, it just doesn't matter. And with levels, they still will never die in this fight, I've found. They are relatively easy to farm too, as long as you got a Reaper Queen and a trap. Finally, at the top of this tier list, we got the obvious choice for this fight, the Rock Drake. The best mobility possible on this map, can go invisible to avoid Reaper attacks, and decent health. The mobility allows you to easily go around the arena and shoot tentacles with a weapon, as you can shoot on the back of these guys. If you farm Nameless Venom too, your Rock Drake will honestly be invincible for the duration of this fight, as unlike Veggie Cake healing, the Nameless Venom healing is instant with no cooldown. This makes it even stronger than Veggie Cakes in my opinion. The only real downside to Rock Drakes to me is that you don't really want to be fighting things head on with it, as it's not a tanky fighter like a Reaper. Still, they can ignore a lot of things in this fight with their invisibility, and this fight in general requires you to move around anyway instead of just sitting in one place to fight things. So I think this downside is kind of whatever. There we have it. That's my ranking for every boss fight and creature on Aberration for Ark Survival Ascended. You can let me know in the comments if you agree with this ranking, or what you would possibly switch up if I forgot something. Thank you all for the support as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Rock skull. All I want to do is stream all night. Lobby full, rock skull. Never gonna play with me, but it's alright.